In the mid-'80s, two friends and I took a short trip from Seattle over to Leavenworth in Washington state. This was a 4-day trip in total, but 2 of those days were for doing some mild backpacking in the Enchantments and camping on Colchuck Lake specifically. I found Colchuck Lake through an older guy I worked with who made it sound like this mythical place in the mountains, which if you've never seen the Enchantments, the whole area really does fit that description. It's on the smaller side, but still a stunning alpine lake with crystal clear turquoise water, and it's surrounded by huge peaks. On this trip, it was me, Mike, and Jacob, and all 3 of us were in our mid-20s. I'll also add that none of us drank, smoked, or did any kind of drugs. I want to emphasize that we weren't up there high on something when this happened. After a roughly 4.5-mile hike up to the lake, we found a spot to camp near the water and had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for dinner. Then we walked around a little bit before it got dark. We were the only people camping on the entire lake that night. After going to bed in our shared tent, I woke up sometime in the night because Mike was unzipping the tent to go outside. It was no big deal. I thought he just had to use the woods for a second, but when he came back in, he asked if I was awake, then asked if I had seen Jacob go out. I told him no because I had been asleep and hadn't even noticed that Jacob wasn't in the tent. Again, this wasn't a big deal. He was probably out doing the same thing. I had mostly fallen back to sleep when Mike woke me up again and said it had been about 15 minutes since he'd gone outside and Jacob still wasn't back. I wasn't worried, but I did sit up and Mike and I waited for a few minutes to see what was going on. I was thinking Jacob had walked off and was possibly having trouble finding the tent again in the dark. It was at this time that we heard the first strange noise. We thought it was an animal because it was like a loud screeching sound that echoed, but it seemed far away from us and most likely coming from somewhere on the other side of the lake. It's kind of like a natural amphitheater with all the peaks and rock around it, so it was hard to tell exactly where it was coming from. We gave it about another 5 minutes or so before opening the tent up and quietly calling Jacob's name. I still wasn't worried yet, but I did want to hear him call back to us with some sarcastic remark about what he was doing in the woods. I'm guessing we waited another 10 minutes and still hadn't heard anything. Mike and I were getting mildly concerned, so we decided to get up and out of the tent to actually call out loud for him so he could find his way back. In my head, I can still hear the first few times we yelled his name because the echo was so loud. There was nowhere you could have been on that lake and not heard us yelling. We had only yelled his name a few times when we heard that screeching sound again from somewhere across the lake, which was extremely loud and long this time. Then we heard the most terrifying and traumatizing thing I've ever heard. It was Jacob's voice letting out an actual blood-curdling scream. Hearing that was like a punch in the face. It was so scary and it put Mike and I into full emergency mode in an instant. I don't know what Mike was thinking in that moment, but I thought Jacob was being ripped apart by a cougar or a bear. In a blind rush, we jumped back into the tent to get our boots and coats on, not even knowing what we were going to do. As scared as we were, we had to try and help him if he was somewhere close to us. We only had a single flashlight, and Mike brought the only weapon, a boot knife, and I remember him pulling it out of its sheath to take with us. We walked off in the general direction we thought we heard Jacob yelling, but stayed right next to each other. I actually picked up a big rock because I had nothing else to defend myself with. It was dead quiet out too, and that made it even more tense because I kept thinking we were going to see the reflection of a cougar's eyes with the flashlight. This was the scariest thing I had ever experienced up to that point in my life, and I genuinely thought our friend was badly hurt or even worse. I would say that we walked a few hundred yards in multiple directions from our tent and found nothing. We were calling Jacob's name the entire time and didn't hear anything either. We eventually decided that the safest thing to do was wait in the tent in case he came back. Then if he wasn't back by the time it got light out, we would hike back to the car and go get help. Just so you know where my mind was during those couple of hours we waited, the only outcome I could imagine was a major search and rescue operation or a body recovery. To my core, I was certain Jacob was not okay. I was sitting on a rock outside the tent with my coat on and my arms wrapped around myself, worried as hell, when Mike's behavior changed. He was facing the lake and looking across to the other side and got this blank look in his eyes, then stood up and started walking off into the dark by himself without the flashlight. This could have been his response to the stress, but I had to get up and physically grab him, then remind him we had to stay at the tent. He looked like he had to shake it off, then apologized to me and sat back down. He did this 3 or 4 times before morning, and every time he acted like he didn't even know he was doing it. He kept saying he needed to get to the other side of the lake, and I would have to remind him how stupid that would be. I don't fault him for it because it was an extremely tense situation, but it looked like he was on autopilot and being lured away from the camp. This might have nothing to do with what happened, but it was odd. Finally, we saw the first hint of light in the sky and started grabbing a few things for the hike out. We were leaving most of our stuff and the tent, but still needed our packs and water. While kneeling on the ground and ready to leave, both Mike and I jumped because we heard these huge booms right in a row. It sounded like massive boulders falling from the mountain, and it echoed across the lake. I've never heard anything like it, and I think both of us nearly pissed our pants. If we thought we wanted to get out of there before, after hearing that, I was ready to sprint the 4 miles back to the car. Mike and I started hiking and hadn't gotten but 50 feet away from the tent when who did we see walking directly toward us? It was Jacob. I lost my composure and dropped my pack on the ground. I actually had tears in my eyes because he looked okay and he was walking, and of course he was alive. Mike and I ran up to him, checking him out for any injuries and asking him a million questions. He acted like we were crazy and said he hadn't done anything. I'll keep this next part short because a lot happened at once. It was chaotic and it took some time to figure out what actually took place. Having said that, he basically told us that the only thing he did was get out of the tent to pee and was walking back when he saw us running up to him. That's all he remembered. He had no idea he had been gone for hours or that we were shouting his name and searching for him. When I say this was like a scene out of a movie, I mean it. In his mind, he was gone for 2 minutes. After telling him what had actually happened, he wondered if he had passed out and laid there unconscious, but I think that's impossible for 3 major reasons. We would have seen him on the ground when we were searching. He couldn't have been unconscious for that long, and we heard his guttural scream echo across the entire lake. We thoroughly checked him out after that, and he didn't have a scratch on him. He wasn't even dirty, which was one more reason he couldn't have just passed out on the ground. By the time the sun was coming up, no one wanted to be up there anymore, so we packed it up and stayed 2 nights in a hotel in Leavenworth. I can't tell you how much time we spent trying to figure out what exactly happened to us, and I still don't know any more today than I did then. We had no answers for why Jacob went missing or what the screeching and loud booms we heard were. That trip went down as the craziest experience in all 3 of our lives, especially so for Mike and me since Jacob has never remembered a thing apart from losing a few hours. Still though, all 3 of us wonder what was going on up there. I live in Sauk City, Wisconsin with my husband and our daughter. My husband works Monday through Friday, and I'm a stay-at-home mom that sells on Etsy as a side gig. My weekday routine is dropping my daughter off at school, then if the weather is decent, I'll go for a run before heading back home. There's a loop I run all the time that goes through Sauk City Park, and it's one of my favorite routes because part of the trail is right along the Wisconsin River. I've been running it for a long time in all kinds of weather, and I know it really well. At the end of October in 2023, I had an experience on that trail that I can't explain. The first morning I noticed something different. I was running like usual, and when I got to the section of trail next to the river, I felt this vibration under my feet. It was pretty noticeable, and even when I stopped for a second, I could tell it was coming from the ground. I could feel it in every step. The other thing I noticed at that same time was a significant temperature change. It felt warmer next to the river, like 10 to 15 degrees warmer than anywhere else on the trail. It also felt like the warm air was coming down from above me, sort of how a heat lamp might feel. As soon as I got past the river section and was heading away from it, both the vibration and the warmer temperature went away. This first experience registered in my mind, but only barely. 2 days after that, I experienced the same thing. I ran my morning loop and felt an identical vibration in the ground next to the river. This time I stopped for a few minutes to make sure it wasn't just me, and without question, I could feel it standing still. The same warmer air was coming down too, and I could swear it was directional. It felt slightly warmer on my head than it did on my legs. I looked for anything around in the park that might be causing it, but there was nothing going on, and not even any people at that time in the morning. Just like the first time, the vibration and the temperature change stopped as soon as I got away from the river. Later that same night, I was taking a shower and noticed that the hot water on my skin was slightly painful. When I got out and was in front of the mirror, it looked like I had a light sunburn. My whole upper body was a little bit red, front and back, shoulders and arms, which made no sense. I was only outside for about 40 minutes the entire day, with a shirt on, and it was October. The only other thing I could come up with was a reaction to food or a detergent. I hadn't eaten anything out of the ordinary, and I never changed our laundry detergent, so I really had no idea. Then came the biggest part of my experience. Only a couple days after I noticed the sunburn, I was back on my usual morning run after dropping my daughter off. When I hit that stretch of river, the vibration and heat were there again, exactly like the other 2 days. I decided I'd run right through, but at about the halfway mark, I saw a flock of starlings flying above the river. These birds move together in really beautiful waves and patterns, and it can be an amazing thing to watch if the flock is big enough. I've seen it many times in the fall and winter months. When the birds got closer to where I was, the entire flock instantly broke apart, with some birds going up, some down, and some to the sides. It looked exactly like they were avoiding something in the sky and flying around it. It created this distinct hole in the middle of the flock because they were all flying around this one single section of sky, probably 100 feet above the river. Here's the crazy part. I actually heard several of them collide with something mid-air, and a handful of the birds just dropped out of the sky and fell straight down into the river. They didn't move after that, and it was a shocking thing to see. The rest of the flock came back together and kept flying up the river like nothing had happened, but I just stood there thinking, what did I just see? There was nothing in the air. There aren't even power lines going across the river, but literally hundreds of birds avoided one large area and flew around it, with some of them clearly hitting something and dying. I've never seen anything like it. After we had put our daughter to bed that night, and because I didn't want her to hear about what I saw, I told my husband what happened. Not nearly as concerned as I was, he agreed it was a crazy thing to see, but then made a joke about the birds running into some cloaked ship and referenced an old Star Trek movie where something similar happened. He was kidding, but his idea stuck with me in a serious way, as impossible as something like that sounds. I mean, what could make the ground vibrate, change the air temperature from above, and make birds avoid one specific shape in the sky like there was a solid object there? I don't know, and I can't even think of anything, and maybe I was looking too deep for an explanation. After that 1 week, everything seemed to be normal again. I never stopped running my loop and only ever felt the vibration and temperature difference during that short time. I go back and forth in my head between two possibilities. One, it was all just a coincidence and there are perfectly rational explanations for everything, even the birds, which I can't explain unless they were running into each other. Or two, maybe there really was something there that I couldn't see just hanging out over the Wisconsin River for a week, and then it was gone. Both of those ideas seem impossible to me in their own ways. Now it's just a question I carry around with me, and I wonder if anyone else saw or noticed anything in the park that week. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure I'll never get a conclusive answer. I had a brief period of time in 2018 where either something beyond my pay grade was going on, or I went temporarily insane and was seeing things other people weren't seeing. and I think it all started because of a single encounter I had at a gas station. I split my time between two houses in New Mexico, my property in Corrales and another house in Albuquerque, so I drive back and forth a lot. One night when I was going back to Albuquerque, I stopped to get gas and pulled into the diesel pump. It was later at night and the only other person there had a large flatbed on the other side of the pump from me. I wasn't paying too much attention to it, but I did notice that the flatbed was painted matte gray from front to back and had nothing on it as far as badging or logos. While I was standing next to my truck, I made eye contact with the other driver and we exchanged a quick "Hey, how's it going?" Then he leaned over to my side and asked how to use the station's discount points. I walked around the pump to show him, even though it was just entering a phone number. Then he thanked me and it was nothing. But when I walked back around to my truck, I saw that the flatbed was carrying some very oddly shaped cylinders that were tightly wrapped and strapped down. He also had no rear license plate. It was just a flat painted bumper. This could be nothing, but it did have a military vibe to it, even though the driver was in plain clothing. We both finished filling up about the same time and I watched the driver climb in and leave before me. As they pulled forward and under one of the overhead lights, I got a clear look into the passenger window. I hadn't even noticed there was another person in the truck, but there was, and he was staring at me. Don't think I'm nuts when I tell you this, but the guy in the passenger seat was missing his nose. He was an otherwise normal-looking guy, but it was just flat skin where his nose should have been. I couldn't see a hole in his head, a scar, a prosthetic, or anything. All I saw was skin. It was startling, but not the sort of thing you want to rudely stare at, so I gave a quick wave and looked back at my truck. They drove off, heading away from Albuquerque, and it took me a second to collect myself because I had never seen anyone with a physical deformity like that. About a month after the gas station, I was coming into Corrales again and stopped at a Circle K for a six-pack. I opened the beer fridge and could hear someone walk up behind me. Before I even turned around, I heard him say that it must be beer o'clock. I turned and shut the door, ready to laugh, and almost stopped breathing. This was a totally different guy that had the exact same missing nose. How could I possibly see two people with the same condition in a month's time? It was identical too. Perfect flat skin where the nose should be. I honestly thought I was losing my mind, but like the first time, I didn't want to be rude, so I gave him a quick "take it easy" and walked to another part of the store. I did feel like he saw the look on my face though. From the other side of the store, I kept glancing over as he bought his beer and left. When I finally got up to the counter, I asked the guy working if he had ever seen anything like that. He looked at me confused, like he didn't know what I was talking about, so I just said it outright. "Have you ever seen someone missing their nose like that?" The awkward confusion was still there, and he told me that he must not have seen who I was talking about. There is no way he didn't notice. You would have to be blind not to see it. I needed to make sure I was still living in reality, and I told him that the person who had just bought beer before me was missing their nose. I could tell this kid thought I was out of my mind, and he just nodded at me. He clearly did not see what I saw. That made me walk out of the store feeling clinically insane. Over the next 2 weeks, it happened 2 more times, and it was always in or around Corrales. One of the times was when I was pulling into a Home Depot parking lot and looked over at the car pulling out at the same time and saw it again. This was a completely different person from the other 2, and he had the same disturbing condition. The 4th and final time, I was at a small local brewery in Corrales, and I watched a group of people walk out to their car. One of the people in the group, another man, had the same exact thing. There were plenty of people around and nobody looked or reacted at all. I was actually ready to see a psychiatrist at that point. After what happened at the brewery, I stopped seeing these people. In total, it happened 4 times over a 6-week period. It had me looking up medical explanations and genetic problems, but I could only ever find trauma cases or rare diseases and cancer, and a few random patients with severe frostbite. Those all came with massive scarring and open holes that were obvious though. What I was seeing was not that. Their faces looked perfect, like they were born that way, just without a nose. I also came across a few fringe theories about other beings here on Earth and how they live among us unnoticed, which is way out there for a guy like me. But at that point, I was open to just about anything. I feel like it started at that first gas station, like that first face was a primer that let me see others, then whatever window it opened in my brain had closed. Trust me when I say this, I know it's a wild claim and I don't even want my name attached because Corrales is a small place. I haven't seen anyone like that in about 7 years, but I still scan faces when I'm in a crowd. And don't think I haven't entertained the idea that it was all in my head and I'm a wacko. That's just as possible as anything else. But maybe I'm not and I caught sight of something I wasn't supposed to see for a short time.